I began learning about this back in 1988. That was the year that we married. And when we had just come back from our honeymoon, and casual moment, walking along the beach, carrying our sandals, and suddenly I turned to him and I say, Frank, I think we should entertain in our home every single person who works for the company. Well, this took him aback, and he said, no, that's a completely ridiculous idea. There are 20,000 people. We can't do that. Well, I pretended that I didn't process the word no, and I said, I think we should have them 100 at a time. And he answered, no, that's way too many. That's just impossible. And so I told him, and I think we should start next month. And of course, again, he said, no, don't even think of it. And I told him, let's start with the secretaries, because the secretaries can tell everybody that our parties are fun. And his initial response to all of this wasn't as if I was from another planet. It was as if I was from another galaxy. But we went round and round with my planning the parties. Because coming from the hotel industry, my inclination is that you solve all problems with hospitality. Well, as we talked more and went round and round with me planning the parties and him saying no, it gradually changed into which he was asking, well, how would that work and how would that work? Until finally we got to the point where he said, you know what? I like it. And so it was that 6 weeks later, we began a series of parties, 100 at a time, 3 times a month for the next 17 years until health meant that he couldn't do it anymore. And these parties, I realized why it was that Frank initially resisted and why in the end he embraced it with all his heart. And the reason why is that you might not guess this from seeing Frank on television. A quick question, how many did you see the ads that he used to do? Yay, yes. Happiness. I think you might not guess from the ads that he was, in fact, a very, very shy person. It really cost him to do those ads. I mean, he had to work at it. It didn't come free-flowing and natural. And the idea, as a shy man, the idea of having hundreds of people in his own private home several times a month, this was just deeply uncongenial to him. And that's why he was so resistant at the beginning. But why he eventually accepted the idea was, for the entire time that I knew him, and I'm going to guess for his entire life, one of the things that moved him most was a quote from William James, the philosopher from 100 years ago. Actually, I've mixed it up. He had a brother. This is the psychiatrist from 100 years ago. William James said, the deepest principle of human nature is the craving for appreciation. And Frank understood that. He had the attitude that everybody walks around with a sign on his or her back saying, make me feel important. And these parties were a way for him to communicate to the people who worked with him. He would never say worked for him, who worked with him, how important they were. Because it really does signal to people that they're important if you're entertaining them in your house. Well, as I said, for the next 17 years, we invited the truckers, the maintenance people, the sanitation people, the auditors, and of course we began with the secretaries, but basically we had everybody, huge numbers. And from my point of view, they were just really impressive because Frank, he had founded a Fortune 500 size company, but during these parties, there would be a buffet about half the length of this podium. And Frank would stand behind it along with some of the servers. By the way, we never had catered parties. It would be the local plant that would provide the food, which guess what was chicken. Okay, a little sidebar. Frank loved chicken and he didn't eat much else. He'd eat fish, chicken, and pasta. So he was serving what he loved. But Frank would stand behind the serving line and he would wait on his employees. And I'm kind of standing aside watching this and thinking, is there any head of a Fortune 500 size company who would actually wait on his employees? And I believe that this touch of what he did was a fantastic employee engagement kind of tool, because I've attended funerals after Frank's passing, but I've attended funerals where the next of kin would say that one of the most moving parts in the deceased life was being invited to Frank Perdue's home. And he didn't just invite them to his home, and he didn't just wait on them. He also did something else that I consider magnificent. He'd stand up in front of his employees, and at the end of the evening, he'd tell them in the most frank, straightforward, transparent way what was going right with the company and what the challenges were. And if let's say that you're a trucker or you're a sanitation worker or whatever, to hear from the big boss's mouth what was really going on in the company, that's got to just cement your engagement with the company, because you've heard from the head of it, the head of the company himself cares enough about you to share this information with you. And then at the end of every one of these dinners, Frank would, I told you he was a shy man, but nevertheless he'd do this. He'd stand up in front of his employees, called associates in Perdue speak. He'd stand up in front of them and he'd tell them, I know that this company wouldn't be what it is today without each of you, and then he'd thank them. Well, that kind of attitude, I think, is one of the reasons that Frank Perdue had the same kind of success that my father did, that he created engagement. He created engagement of the sort that if you go to Perdue headquarters in Salisbury, Maryland, you'll see a whole lot of people. I mean, today there are 22,000 associates. And to get into the building, you have a security card that you show by the door and you get in. But if you were to look at the security cards, and I've done this, of people with white hair, you'll see the photograph of a young person, maybe somebody in their 20s, because the legend in Perdue is that if you start with Perdue, you stay with Perdue, usually for life. And I wrote a biography of Frank Perdue. I interviewed 143 people. And the amount of loyalty that I heard, because he would do so many things to show people that they were important.